listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 275. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me today is Trace Sauveur.
Hello.
Trace, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. I feel like I was here not that long ago.
You're not. And this is going to be like a monthly thing now. We're just going to have you come in and talk about the state of movies. Last time we had Trace on, we talked about, we got down to business, and we each shared a soda pop or two, talking about Steven Soderbergh.
Indeed.
And now I've asked Trace to come on and do the impossible, which is to potentially fix the MCU.
And I think we can do it. I think me and you can do it. I'm not sure anyone at Marvel is able to do it at this point, but I think maybe if me and you put our heads together, we could come up with something better than the movie we're talking about today.
I feel like we can. We're here to talk a little bit about Captain America: Brave New World, and then we're going to try to fix the MCU. I think we're going to try to fix the MCU. And better yet, we're gonna try to fix cinema in general. Because I think, which is what kind of the MCU has been for the last 2-ish decades. We're not even 2 decades into this, by the way. Like, that's the crazy thing.
Jesus Christ! When you put it that way,
this started in 2008. So we are not near the 2 decade. We are close, but by the time we get to the the next Avengers movies, we will be close enough to the 20-year mark. That is
still not even.
No, we will be a year away. We'll be at the 19-year mark.
And like I think Captain America: Brave New World is the 35th movie in this franchise.
I'm going to take you at your word there.
It's somewhere around there.
Well, okay. So it's the 35th movie, but there's also 9,000 television shows that have come out. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a second. I don't want to get too far ahead. See, this is what happens when Trace gets here. He gets me a little off track, but that's okay. That's what he's here for.
That's what I do.
Trace, you did the review for Captain America: Brave New World. This is a big release, which we kind of had far and in between throughout last year. Like we only had one Marvel movie last year.
Yeah.
And that was your favorite film of the year, Deadpool Wolverine?
Absolutely. There was no better movie.
There was no other movie
last year, and it got completely shut out of the Academy Awards.
It just shows the Travis mockery of the Oscars, right? The Deadpool Wolverine.
It shows the anti-Ryan Reynolds Academy Awards bias.
Yeah, I guess the Oscars have made their decision known as to who they side with the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively case. They've gone complete on the other side of that.
They're not saying it out loud, but they don't have to. I know.
Yeah, the branches of the Academy are like, well, I don't know, but no, that was a big film. It made a ton of money. I don't believe you liked it.
I didn't like it very much. Not to get too in the weeds about my opinion about the Deadpool sub-series of MCU movies, but I find them annoying and juvenile and just generally not very funny. I'll say I probably thought that movie was more entertaining than the movie we're talking about today.
Okay.
But that's a pretty low bar to clear.
I thought the movie was an interesting exercise into what the MCU could be in terms of trying to continue what they want to do, with something that's completely outside of their wheelhouse. I also found it just to be an interesting way of using Marvel material, MCU material, to be nostalgic and also lay tribute to what came before them, which was the Fox franchises, because the X-Men, Daredevil, Elektra, Blade, all those films, Wolverine, those characters really laid the groundwork for the MCU. So they're to blame for all this, really, in a lot of ways. But it's the truth. Like, this is kind of them doing the Spider-Man No Way Home sort of thing, but in a way that felt less cash grabby because there were a lot more surprises in this, even though they clearly are cash grabs at this point.
And
so, but then we didn't have anything else, which kind of made for a very interesting year because then the type of year that was 2024
Hmm.
is kind of the year that people want. Maybe one Marvel movie, one comic book movie, but the brands of comic book movies themselves did not have a really great year. The
Yeah.
Sony films, outside of like Madam Web becoming a funny viral sensation, the the Sony films didn't do well. The
Nope.
Venom movie didn't do well. Uh, what was it? Craven the Hunter
Oh God.
tanked. Uh, and and there's no DC right now because DC's coming back this year with their reboot, right?
Yeah.
From James Gunn. And there was no new Batman film because they haven't even started that from Matt Reeves. So like that was it last year. Kind of peaceful in the land,
Yeah,
you
it was kind of
know?
like a cleanse.
And it kind of made for an interesting year because then we got to see like original horror movies dominated. Uh New things or nostalgic things got to kind of dominate that were otherwise very rare, like
Hmm.
Gladiator, Sonic the Head, like kids movies like Sonic the Hedgehog and Mufasa.
Yeah, yeah,
Wicked,
yeah.
Wicked being a big thing, and a new dominant sort of franchise in Dune earlier in the year. Like, the summer kind of didn't look that great, but a lot of that had to do with the strikes. So that's
Hmm.
why we're here now. In a more normal year, we are going to have three Marvel movies come out this year. So
Back to
when
it.
this back to reality in a lot of ways. And this is the first one. This is Captain America Brave New World. And it is a continuation of the Captain America film series. This is the first time Anthony Mackie, who plays Sam Wilson, is in a film form donning the shield. He did it in The Falcon and Winter Soldier. Trace, did you watch that series?
No.
Okay, that's
I did,
that's
I did not watch that series.
that's fine. I'm not going to hold anything against you. There are people on this staff that haven't even watched probably like a single Marvel thing. So like that's okay too. And
They're
I'm
better for it.
they're better for it. They're better human beings for it. And I totally agree with you on that. So this is his first like solo film mission. Um and this also has Harrison Ford, who is playing Thunderbolt Ross, who is now President Thunderbolt Ross,
Yep.
and taking over the mantle from John Hurt, right?
Indeed. Yeah, William Hurt.
William Hurt. Sorry, um, and everything. So because he recently passed away, and this has a ton of different films that it connects to. We'll talk about those worst connections, and we'll talk about what this movie is. But first off, Trace, we're just gonna lay it on the table here.
Okay.
I don't need you to go into fixing things, but I need to know your sort of relationship with the MCU because this is the first time we've
Yeah.
actually had to talk about weirdly the MCU as their current timeline has for like 2 years. We haven't had to actually talk about this on the show, which has been great for my health, but and maybe not for the listeners, but definitely something that we're gonna have to talk about throughout the rest of the year. And so
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Trace has signed up for all those episodes, so he'll
I'll
be
be
able
back
to
for every single one.
every single one of them.
Thunderbolts comes out May 2nd, 2025.
And he's going to be here. And then Fantastic Four, he'll totally be here.
Yep.
He's wearing a Fantastic Four shirt right now, and he's got like one of those foam fingers up in the air,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
got the four. You know what I mean? Up in the air. Uh,
Yes.
but your relationship with the MCU.
My relationship with the MCU, I mean, Iron Man came out in 2008, and so I was like, I was 10 years old. So I was a kid. And so when you're a kid, or at least when I was a kid, I just kind of liked these entertaining superhero movies. So I was kind of indoctrinated just from being a kid that liked to see the first Iron Man movie, the first Incredible Hulk movie, and then kind of growing up as a preteen and a teenager with like phase one of the Avengers saga. And enjoyed those movies as a teen. Slowly grew out of them as I kind of got a more refined palette for what movies I enjoy watching, but still generally kept up with the franchise as it kept going, especially through phase two, where, I was still relatively young watching those movies. And so I enjoyed them for what they were, especially that was when Guardians of the Galaxy came out. And so that felt like a kind of a breath of fresh air for the franchise at that point. Um, I feel like it was really once they got to phase three around the 2016 time with Civil War and everything, where I started becoming just super checked out with whatever was happening with this franchise and kind of kept up with it out of obligation through Endgame and through the last Spider-Man movie. And otherwise, phase four onwards, kind of like post-pandemic MCU era, I have not felt as obligated to keep up with it. I don't really care about what's happening in it. And there are multiple of the movies that I haven't seen. But occasionally, like today with this one, I'll kind of check in and see what's going on with it and find that they haven't really done anything to differentiate this in any meaningful way. So, it's something I enjoyed, and I recognize the cultural cachet it has and how phase one through three is kind of a unique thing that happened like in cinema, like this big interconnected web of comic book like movies that connect like comic books is what I mean. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the way they were able to make that work, to the extent they were able to make it work despite the deficiencies of the individual movies during that time. I think everything post Endgame is just completely take it or leave it. Like we can kind of stop this at any point, basically.
So he's a big fan.
As I said, I'm still
no,
waving my
no, I feel like
finger.
honestly, I feel Trace like you are perfectly surmising how the modern audience is taken to these things
Yeah,
now. And so we'll talk about that here, I think, in the second part of this whole discussion. And so that's just kind of like a good intro into Captain America: Brave New World, a movie you reviewed up on the site.
I did.
A glowing recommendation. Truly, just when I opened up behind the scenes, when I opened up the review that Trace sent me for this, I went, I don't know what to expect, because I mean everybody was sort of slopping it up online. And then I look at Trace's review and I'm like, oh, there's the counterpoint. All right, let's go.
Well, it's funny too because like it's always funny when the early Marvel reviews come out because they're always glowing and they're always just from like influencer people that just will say whatever, anything good about the movie that'll keep them that'll keep the press people happy and keep them on good standing with the PR people that gets them into things. But then like the actual reviews for this movie come out, it's like a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that Rotten Tomatoes is the ultimate like barometer for film quality, but it is a good reference point as far as, especially compared to other MCU movies in the past, which were always like in the high 80s, high 90s. And then the cinema score even came out, which is a B minus, which is terrible for a
That
Marvel
is like
movie.
that's like you and I going to college and getting a D plus.
Yes.
When we have been like, that would be like if for our first 2 years we consistently got A's.
Yeah.
Then our junior year we started fucking around.
Yeah, we didn't know what to do.
We didn't know what to do. We were like, should I change majors? Should I should I go
Should I
work?
transfer universities?
Yeah, should I not be at school anymore? What's the meaning of life? And but I still got like I would say a B minus, like, for the most part. And then like my senior year, I was like, oh fuck it, gosh, the win. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Like, I'm just here to get the credits and leave. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where the MCU's at. It's crazy that analogy kind of works. But anyway, this film, you didn't see Captain America, you've seen all the Captain America films, I assume, before this with Evans.
I've seen all the films. I just haven't. I didn't watch the show. I did not watch the Anthony Mackie.
That's
show.
Okay. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of the point. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. So your thoughts on the 35th film? Yeah, you are right. The 35th film, Captain America: Brave New World in the MCU. Your thoughts on this film?
Yeah, I mean, just from a kind of top level perspective, pretty broadly, I think it pretty much epitomizes the stagnation that the MCU is facing right now, in that this is towards the end of Phase 5. The last movie in Phase 5 is supposed to be Thunderbolts, according to the Wikipedia page I'm looking at. And then Phase 6 is supposed to start with the Fantastic Four this summer. And yet, it's been a whole phase since Endgame, which was kind of the culmination of that entire era of the MCU, really. It was kind of the big bang finale. And yet we are still just kind of spinning our wheels, not sure what we're doing, just kind of running in place with where the franchise is at, really, because despite being this far away from Endgame, which came out 5 years, 6 years ago, we're still making these movies that totally subsist and rely on past reference points and recognizable things from 15 plus year old movies instead of trying to really forge a new path forward. It kind of makes like vague gestures towards moving forward because it has to, because it's really just kind of setting you up for the next thing, which will inevitably be tied to the past somehow. But at the end of the day, this is a new Captain America movie with a new Captain America that nonetheless is basically a secret sequel to The Incredible Hulk from 2008, which is the most insane idea that anyone at Disney or Marvel or whoever could have had for this movie that is and for the larger perspective of the franchise, which again is ostensibly supposed to be kind of pushing us forward. It continues to just be stuck in the past. And on top of that, the movie itself is just it feels like it was stitched together in post. I mean, this movie had a ton of post-production issues, went through a ton of reshoots, and you can just tell this is a mess of a movie. It all the seams are showing. It feels like it was re-edited a dozen times. Yeah, and it carries the same issues that every other MCU movie has, as far as they're just kind of like homogeny of like this looks the same as every single one. The action feels the same. It doesn't really have a distinct point of view, which is, and we can get into this more, which is a particular issue with the fact that it's supposed to be like a political thriller. Um, it's just not entertaining. It's just not entertaining. It really just feels like this is kind of like a real low point for that represents the issue that Marvel is facing with trying to carry the torch forward. And I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see what they do to kind of come back from this with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, and if those movies show that they haven't even an inkling of an idea of an original idea of how to take this forward past the original Phase 1 to 3 era.
I think that this movie sucks. There's no going
much more succinct.
There's done podcast, lock it up. No, I haven't felt this type of waste of time in a while. I weirdly think that it's worse than even the movies that I thought were the worst movies of the year last year. Like I kind of still would sit through like Here and Megalopolis and maybe even, well, not Argyle, but definitely like it felt like that. It felt like to the weird extent, like it felt like honestly, like you'll know this reference and everybody else will. I felt like it was being punked by the MCU. Like I felt like I was like, you're not really doing this, are you? Because you're right. This movie made like had to have like a ton of reshoots. It's a $180 million budget. I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to 200, 250.
Absolutely.
Based off of it. But of course, Marvel's going to lie to you. Julius Ona, right? Is that, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
This is the typical Marvel brand where Julius Ona This is his fourth film. If many people don't know who he is, he did like a movie that nobody even knows what it is called The Girl is in Trouble. He did the Cloverfield Paradox, which is it's easily the worst Cloverfield movie,
Yeah.
and was a massive mistake. And then he did a movie called Loose, the same year as Endgame, which I don't know what you think of Loose. I was not on the Loose bandwagon.
I haven't seen it, so I have
Oh,
I
okay.
have no stake. I have no stake on Loose.
Well, you're very loose thoughts here. Okay. I'll save you. I think Loose is like it's a very interesting idea. It's a very him idea. It actually feels like something he wanted to actually tell and felt like a real movie in this filmography of his. It's an actual real movie. I don't think it's particularly that interesting, but I think it's an actual real movie from the guy.
Hmm.
So then the typical Marvel thing happens where somebody makes an interesting indie film. So that means we've got to throw a boatload of cash at him to get him to stop making movies like that. And so movies like that don't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Like, because
Hmm.
um, this is the reason why Sinners, Trace, to me is one of my most anticipated films of the year because they got Ryan Coogler stuck out of the basement and making
Yeah.
Black Panther movies for 5 seconds to make something original, something interesting, something distinctively his voice. And not to say that those Black Panther films aren't that, but when you've made that for like he's made Black Panther movies for probably let's say he started in 2016 making a Black Panther movie. That's almost 8 years,
Hmm.
9 years of making them or having to discuss them. Being in the machine that long is a lot. And I think Marvel is a machine. People think that I'm saying that as like a
Absolutely.
mean thing. It's the truth. Sometimes you people can't handle the truth. And like Jack Nicholson says, it's the truth. Marvel is a machine. They're a cash flowing operating machine and they have gears and those gears are the films that they process through every single year to keep the machine
Yeah,
going.
and this machine needs to run as efficiently as possible. Is the
If
main
it
thing.
doesn't run efficiently, the whole thing crumbles.
Yes, which is
And
completely at odds with like an art with like having an actual like artistic perspective or statement, basically.
exactly. And really it there's two minds of it. The machine can keep going and until it breaks, kind of like the DCEU,
Yes.
or it can keep going whether we like it or not. And it's most likely going to make money, but it's empty calories. And that's kind of what we're on here right now. There's
Hmm.
no value to any of this. And this is a perfect movie to really surmise the issues of the MCU. If you thought Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was a problem, this is, I would say, just as big a problem as that movie is.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that, like, these are two movies now that show that potentially this franchise died after Endgame.
Hmm.
Because,
Absolutely.
and the only thing keeping it alive is marquee names and marquee superheroes like Deadpool and Wolverine and Spider-Man. Like,
Yes.
and Spider-Man movies will make billions of dollars because it's fucking Spider-Man, you
Hmm.
know? And some of these other films have made a lot of money. A lot of these movies have made money. But this one was going to be a tough sell because one, the trailer looked horrible. This movie looks horrible when you watch it, so that doesn't help. You're then having to replace a it's not like Chris Evans passed away and we're replacing him. I
Hmm.
think, we are literally replacing Captain America. So this is like honestly a case for can you do Miles Morales in live action to Peter Parker? It's a case for that. I disagree with that logic because the fact that you have the Into the Spider-Verse films that show that like Miles' story can be told and
Yeah.
people would be interested in. Again, it's Spider-Man. But This movie looks bad from the get-go.
It looks very bad.
The story doesn't really make any sense.
Incoherent.
Very incoherent.
The plot is
There's no point to
completely,
it.
yeah,
And
there's not.
I think the problem with this movie also, Trace, you said what movie it ties into. That movie came out also in 2008.
Yes.
That was the
Which
second film in this franchise.
not only did it come out in 2008, I would argue it's like most people treat it as kind of a non-entry in the franchise. Like people don't really refer back to the Incredible Hulk as like an MCU movie. Yes, it like is one, obviously. There are characters, including the Hulk, who carry over, but it kind of gets separated as sort of a black sheep because first of all, obviously Hulk was recast. And I mean, honestly, it's pretty much, I think that I feel like that's a lot of the main reason. The other main reason is that they didn't make any follow-up Hulk movies. And so you have this lone Incredible Hulk movie from 2008 starring Edward Norton as the Hulk that yes has William Hurt in it and he comes back and he's a presence throughout the MCU and everything, but he's kind of the lone strand that really kind of connects everything back to the Incredible Hulk. Captain America Brave New World is asking for something completely different in that it's kind of like making that a key text for you to have to pay attention to enjoy this movie. On top of two other uh, Marvel properties that either no one really watched or really cared about or weren't very good, which was Eternals and the Captain America television show.
Yeah.
So it's just a grab bag of references from the past of the MCU of properties that like you shouldn't have to remember to watch this movie.
Well, that's the thing. Is I think the reason why this movie isn't successful for me is because the television show existed. And
Yeah,
I'm not saying the television show Falcon Winter Soldier was good. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this should have been the first time we saw Sam as Captain America
agreed.
struggling through the political landscape, the cultural landscape of taking a mantle that's huge on his shoulders. And what's crazy is from that television series, we're still talking about that in this movie.
Yes.
And by the end of that television series, it was established he's Captain America. He wants this. And in the middle of this movie again, he's like, I don't know if I want this anymore. And it felt as if we were rehashing the same storyline that we saw 3 years ago in a television series. Now, I did watch that television series.
Yeah.
Um, my wife was a big fan of these things. Now she is kind of like you and sporadic because she's like, oh, I didn't see that show or I didn't see this thing. And I think that this is the larger problem is when the television shows have started to impact the films, audiences don't care because it's honestly the problem that Pixar faced, where Pixar movies got dumped on Disney Plus for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And Disney had to re-educate audiences on seeing movies on the big screen again for a while. And now they're Inside Out 2 and Elemental last year was in 2023 was a surprising hit. And now they're going to do like an original movie this year and we'll see how LEO is for them. Marvel, on the other hand, is not learning from any of that. They're like,
No.
we're going to keep making television shows. We're going to connect them, every single one of them, to the movies. And now this is really the first one that wholeheartedly is from a television idea continuing into the movie in a major plot point way. Like, yes, there's been like in like Deadpool Wolverine, there was the TVA, which is from like the Loki films,
Mm-hmm.
or Loki show, but like which was introduced there, which is honestly a huge thing to introduce on a television series, and then just like start using that as a plot point in that movie. But also like Deadpool Wolverine, it's the only way to get Wolverine back into this movie, right?
Yeah.
because he died in Logan, which
And
all
that's
that,
and that's
like
something
that's okay.
yeah, and like in that movie, I did because I didn't watch the Loki show either. I haven't watched any of the TV shows. At least in
He's
Deadpool and
watching them this
Wolverine,
weekend.
I'm in the middle. I'm taking
He's,
a break from binging them right now to record this podcast.
thank
At
you
least
for your service.
you're welcome. At least in Deadpool and Wolverine, that's something that's like, okay, I can infer what this is, and like this doesn't have a great bearing on me, like like following this movie's coherency. Captain America Brave New World kind of falls apart if you don't have kind of an intimate understanding of the arcs that happen in that television show. I kept up a little bit because I kind of did some research beforehand just to see what I needed to know going in because I knew I was going to be missing things, and I knew that Marvel's kind of content churn and their insistency that this all has to be a big exercise in brand synergy between their streaming platform and the theatrical releases means that going in to one of these movies without having caught up and done homework on every single thing now means you are not going to be getting you're not going to be catching every single thing that you possibly are supposed to from this movie, which was true also for the original three phases of the franchise. But at least those movies were just interconnected to each other, which is still like it's asking you to do a lot. Like you do still have to catch up with every single one of these movies and have an understanding of all of these character arcs throughout these disparate individual movies, which is kind of its own problem. But now it's just kind of it's just gotten out of hand. And like I just don't feel like I should be expected to watch 5 TV shows to have an understanding of a single movie. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if you are going to do that, kind of to your point, like I feel like Anthony Mackie's first appearance as Captain America and his kind of arc about whether he wants to be Captain America or not, which is not a bad not a bad perspective, especially like if you want to consider him as like a black man in America, kind of juxtaposed against Steve Rogers, good white boy, classic American white boy Captain America. That is better served, I feel like, in a movie first, and then you can have a television show after they've kind of gone through that arc where he is Captain America now, and he has a TV show on Disney Plus where they kind of have their own individual mission or string of missions that they're going on for the TV show post the movie where that very important arc has already taken place. Here it just feels like I just have no context for anything happening in this movie.
That's fair. And everything you just said there is exactly what he went through in the television show for 8 episodes.
Yeah.
And it just feels recycled. And Harrison Ford, who is Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross in this film, completely wasted.
Totally wasted. Completely wasted.
Absolutely sleepwalking through this thing. The thing that has been marketed the most is Red Hulk.
Yeah,
which is this thing
Hulk
that
is red
people
now.
that they have been wanting this. This is the fan service. This is like, we're gonna give you Red Hulk. You've been asking for Red Hulk for a long time, and it's barely in this movie. And it's actually like a twist. It's supposed to be like a twist in the film.
It's played as a twist, but it's the main centerpiece of the marketing.
It's the main piece of the marketing. It's the twist of the film. It's wild then that they would reveal it.
Yes.
Because, and I mean, like on every poster, even the simple teaser poster, it's Hulk holding the shield and Red Hulk. I mean, not like not Bruce Banner. And this is something that they teased, but in teasing this, it's like, I feel like Marvel should send out a list of things that its fans need to prepare themselves for the next film, because
they need a pamphlet.
Like they need to like not a previously watched, but like, hey, if you want to watch this, you need to watch such and such and such, right?
Yes,
because to your point, The Incredible Hulk in 2008 is considered by many to be a really bad film, probably one of the worst in the MCU. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's like, it's a typical action film. Like it's with the Hulk, and It's not bad. It's not to me. It's not bad. I think
Hmm.
the reason why people rank it low is because it doesn't have Ruffalo, and it was like second film out of the gate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was an Iron Man, which I think everybody loves Iron Man. I still think the original Iron Man is still the best MCU movie because as a movie, it contains itself as a fun John Favreau sort of action comedy
Yeah.
more than it has to be like we've got to connect to 19 multiverses here. And it's like, oh geez, simpler times.
Yeah. It just doesn't have the same obligations. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So it gets to stand on its own. It gets to be unique. It gets to kickstart something, and that's what makes it special, for me. And these films, these Captain America films, they're to varying degrees I've liked them.
Hmm.
So the first one, Captain America First Adventure, going back to the 1950s, really kind of fun film there. Almost kind of weirdly reminded me of like Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, those kind of old
Sure. Yeah.
serials.
Yeah.
Like it kind of felt like that. Pretty like fun movie, introduces Evans to the whole thing. Winter Soldier, probably the one of the best MCU movies. And it really does make this movie look like shit in comparison
It does.
because of the fact that like that movie, even if you have problems with it, that movie is committed to a conspiracy thriller within a superhero movie genre that sadly enough, the Russo brothers know how to make very entertaining. And then Civil War, a movie I don't really care for.
Same.
It kind of at least continues that and invites new things into the franchise, like Black Panther, to keep you interested in it, and Spider-Man, interested enough to understand that these guys are going to be the guys that are be able to handle the big Marvel finales, which is Endgame and Infinity War,
Hmm.
or Infinity War Endgame in that order. Sorry. And so I think this movie also just has a Russo brothers problem because I think the Russo brothers were able. This is their story. Like this has been their story. They stepped out of Marvel. They wanted to do all their crappy Netflix movies, and now they're going to come back and they're going to try to save the world, and literally save Marvel from themselves with the two new Avengers movies coming out. But I don't know. It felt like this could have been a really big opportunity to have a conversation about race, have a conversation about uh, picking up a mantle like, the one that Sam's doing. If I hadn't already seen that, if the show didn't already exist, and if the show exists, then the continuation of that should be done, or this should be a full-on embrace of this mantle, and we don't have to, there's a moment in the trailer and there's a moment in the film where Ross goes, "You're not Steve Rogers." And I sit there and I go, we've already done this. And that's the whole thing, is redundancies, redundancies, redundancies. The idea of it connecting to a television show that nobody really liked, a movie nobody really liked, to the Eternals, which is a movie that I don't hate the Eternals, and I don't blame Chloe Zhao for that. That's just
Yeah.
I don't know where any of those characters are going to connect to anything. And this movie just kind of feels like we have to get people back into a theater to see a Marvel movie. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know why we're really going to do it, but we're going to dangle a carrot in front of their face. We're going to give them Bucky in a cameo to set up his appearance in Thunderbolts.
Yep.
And that's all we're really doing here. And then we're going to give you, once again, another very just absolutely ridiculous thing at the end. The teaser is essentially just teasing everything we've already seen through press releases. Like something's, and we've done this enough where something's coming, and and your world is not the only world out there.
That was
And-
my.
And it's like,
I
the fuck are we doing here?
That thing was like, that's something they already know in the universe. Like in movie, they already know that there's not the only world out there. Like this is something that we've like established.
They've all
And
had
like
lunch with Doctor Strange. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
and like that also carries over to the plot because the whole thing is that Isaiah Bradley, a character that you would have no context for unless you watch the TV show,
Yep, exactly.
I tries to kill the president, and he's brainwashed, and they're trying to uncover this conspiracy about him being brainwashed, but like they treat him being brainwashed as if this is something that has never happened before, as if Bucky Barnes isn't standing right there in a big part of this franchise. And like it seems like
So
this
that is so true. I didn't actually really think about that until
yeah.
until you said it.
Like
That's
they
so
they
true.
they uncovered like, whoa, they figured out how to brainwash him. Like, yeah, this is a thing that's been established as capable of happening in this world already. Like this is not new information, that this isn't so crazy that this would have happened. I can't believe that Anthony Mackie didn't piece it together, that that's like what happened.
Like brainwashing either Captain America's or like friends of his.
Yeah,
No, that doesn't happen.
Never happened. So it's like this movie is like forgotten like core elements of the franchise. It's like so ridiculous, actually. Um, and I don't know. You mentioned like you mentioned briefly some of like just like the political aspects of it, since it is like a kind of a conspiracy thriller, and it's kind of it's trying to cosplay as a political thriller. But just like it's just so cowardly when it comes down to it, when it comes to tackling some of the bigger issues that it wants to tackle. And Robert Daniels at Roger Ebert wrote a pretty scathing, great review just about how poorly this treats its optics, with Anthony Mackie, as the new Black Captain America, and how he ultimately still kind of has to serve white institutions, and just kind of like take it on his face and be happy with it, and kind of um kind of is forced to both sides very much this issue at the center of the movie. There's a line in the movie that I wrote down when I was watching it because I thought it was ridiculous and very cowardly, where he says, if we can't see the good in each other, we've already lost the fight. Which I think is just such a naive and like just so simplistic outlook, and like it's just such naive commentary with regards to the place we are in this country right now and the administration that's in office, especially when Thaddeus Ross he's kind of like he's kind of supposed to represent, I think, the institutions at large, because he's very clearly is kind of Trumpy. He, you know, he has an anger problem. He silences the media. But his messaging is kind of like unity, kind of like more left, like more liberal, democratic leaning, like we need to come together on this sort of things. But then he kind of has a dark side that he hides, and he clearly has authoritarian personality traits. And this is also kind of informed from some of his previous movies appearances as well. And so he's clearly supposed to represent, at least it's on some level, some kind of fascistic government oversight. And to have, I don't know, to have the ultimate conclusion between him and Anthony Mackie be like, hey, we just need to come together and try to find the good in each other and understand each other, and maybe everything will be okay. It's just so like it's just so simple, so simplistic and ridiculous to me. And it's because
it's emotionally hollow. That's for
it
sure.
is. And it's just they can't have an actual radical perspective on any kind of political issue, because this is a corporate franchise. It's a corporate movie. Like this, they're preserving a brand more than anything with this movie. And you mentioned it as well, with like they needed to put something out, especially since last year Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, really, that's kind of its own thing. They need, the Marvels came out in 2023. I didn't see that, so I'm not really sure how much that connects to the larger MCU interconnected universe thing. And then before that, also in 2023, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, good movie, but also kind of its own thing. So we haven't had maybe something that really connects the franchise together since Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, maybe, and that was 2 years ago. So, like you said, they really needed to put something out just to kind of keep people on the line. And so it is just like a corporate kind of augmenting exercise where they just kind of have to keep the brand going, no matter if like they have a reason to or not, or if the movie's good or not. They just have to put it out because otherwise they can't not. They have to have it. So I don't know.
It's on live support.
It is.
I want to, we can open this up even further to sort of like our we could fix this, or maybe how we're going to feel about the MCU going forward. Because I think that if this is what we're going to get until the Avengers movies, because that's the thing, Trace, is that in the 6 years, we're going to do a little time travel game, because the MCU loves time travel.
Yes, they sure do.
So in the 6 years, we haven't had that since Endgame, we haven't had a Avengers movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Iron Man was released in the first MCU phase, that was the culmination of 4 years and 6 films. That was the culmination of a promise that we were going to see all those characters together. There was a nervousness that if that was going to work at all, right?
Yeah.
And yet it was the biggest film of that year, I believe. And honestly, pretty decent, entertaining film. Kind of then opened up Pandora's box as to what we could expect. The next Avengers movies were 3 years later, because Avengers Age of Ultron came out 3 years later, ties up 4 films together, including Guardians of the Galaxy all there. All right. Then literally a year later is Civil War.
Yes.
Which is essentially an Avengers movie. It has everybody in. Outside of Thor, it had everybody that we had, outside of Thor and the Guardians, it had everybody that we saw in the MCU at that point.
Yeah.
So everybody. And then it introduced Black Panther, Spider-Man. So there's that. Then after Civil War, 2 years later is Infinity War. And then the next year is Endgame. You kind of see where I'm getting at here, right?
I do see what you're
where they have all these movies, and some of these movies don't exist. Like you know what I mean? Like the first Doctor Strange movie doesn't exist. The Ant-Man movies don't exist. You know what I mean? Like Thor the Dark World doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like even Age of Ultron doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay? But the thing about Endgame and Infinity War and Civil War and Age of Ultron and the Avengers, the first one, all those movies were able to connect everybody back together, and it showed an overall sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We have had 7 films in the phase 4. We had 1 movie post Endgame with Far From Home, Spider-Man Far From Home. So that's 8 films there, right?
Yep.
Then we had an additional 6 films. So that's 13 that we're going to have post Endgame that have no Avengers movie.
Right.
Right? Then you add in, and that's in from phase 4 to phase 5, and 1 film in phase 3. Phase 6 starts this year with the Fantastic Four First Steps. Stupid title, whatever. So that would make 14 films before we get to Avengers Doomsday, which essentially is going to have to somehow get all these motherfuckers back together and do it in a way in which they're a team by the end of Secret War, or by the end of that film to be Secret Wars.
Yeah.
Which is the next year. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is an impossible task.
I agree.
If that movie, Avengers Doomsday, which comes out next year, supposedly that comes out next year in May, if that movie somehow is coherent, that might be the most successful movie in film history, because it has to connect not only every ancillary character in the films, it then has to go and connect WandaVision, Loki, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel,
even listed all the TV shows,
She-Hulk, the Secret Invasion series, which was a mess, Echo, Agatha All Along, and then the new Daredevil. Like it has to connect all these things. Oh, and mind you, there's still somewhere in the production schedule supposed to be a Blade movie,
Yeah,
and and
and,
Deadpool Wolverine's like world.
and there's more TV shows coming out this year. Like Eyes of Wakanda is coming out. I'm not sure how much these are expected to connect to the current to the current theatrical world. But they
Wonder
got
Man,
yeah,
whatever the hell that
who are
is,
the Wonder
whatever the
Man.
fuck that is. Yeah,
That's not real. Y'all
Wonder
making
Man,
up shit
like
now.
Wonder Man is Dustin Daniel Critton, who I believe did Shang-Chi. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
okay. Another fake movie.
Another, well, yes.
I didn't really like
You
Shang-Chi.
didn't like it? Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't mind it, but I also like the third act of that movie is just very unwatchable. But I was at least like, okay, this is mildly entertaining. It's better than Black Widow movie, which by the way, that exists within this world too, like a prequel,
yes.
so that we can just get Florence Pugh character in there now into the world. But anyway, the point being is that there's there's 29 seasons of television series already out there, which is wild. Um, you know, from Marvel Television, from the Marvel Studios, there's 15 seasons, 12 series. So we've done this by, mind you, in like a 4-year span, which is crazy.
Insane. Absolutely
So
insane content churn.
that movie Trace has to connect everything, every
Which
character, which is, I think, impossible.
if
I
they
think
do
it's an
it,
impossible thing.
I will take back every single thing I've said about the MCU, and I will retroactively ask you to edit my Captain America Brave New World review and give it an A+. I will take
Not
it
going to
off
change a
that.
word in it, just going to
No,
change the grade.
just change the grade, and maybe
We'll add like one last sentence where it's like, but you know what? It's a masterpiece. So
I got to give it to him.
I got to give it to him.
No, you're right. There's absolutely no way that
There's no way.
Avengers Doomsday has any chance of coherently connecting all this shit together. Um, and yet like they're relying on it to like inject some kind of rejuvenated life into it, especially by bringing Anthony and Joe Russo back, and obviously bringing fucking Robert Downey Jr. back to be Doctor Doom. Again, they're relying on a recognition of shit that's already happened. Like even if he's a completely different character, even if he has no connection to the original Tony Stark, but he's still Robert Downey Jr. Obviously, like the pull is that, oh, we got Robert Downey Jr. again playing in the MCU again. So it's the same cyclical shit that they don't that's all they know how to do, because they can't move forward in any interesting way. Like it feels like it feels like they've done it. They did it. It ended with Endgame, and now they like that was it. As far as like having that kind of stranglehold and that kind of just as much as there's a lot of the Marvel movies that I don't like, and as much as I think that they're all kind of interchangeable with one another, and I never have any desire to ever go back and revisit it really most of them, even from the initial three phases. I recognize that was like largely a pretty focused effort that all led up to Endgame, and they all at least like I see the success of that project from an objective point of view. That's not there anymore.
No,
It's
it's completely gone. And Feige, I think that the thing that Kevin Feige wishes that he had was a time machine. Because I think they should have had a break.
Absolutely.
This right now, 5-6 years later, should have been when they started everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 5 years, they have scrambled. I'm just going to go through these films with you. And I want the listeners out here to know this is not a hate fest, but this is literally a plan. Like Marvel was known for being very strategic in the first three phases.
That's a good
all
word,
going to lead somewhere, right? And you all fall, Kevin Feige down this trail. And so they're of course going down this new saga, the multiverse saga, as they're calling it, was going to be something that people were going to initially just trust, because if they got us to the Infinity War saga or the Infinity Saga or whatever the fuck it's called, and get to that literal end game, right?
Yes.
Where that movie was at one point the highest grossing movie of all time. Like, you cannot take away, like what Trace and I are saying is, you cannot take away, regardless of what you think of the quality of those movies, regardless of what you think those movies did to overall movies in general.
Yeah.
They were cultural, they were cultural moments that audience members decided we wanted to go to the theater and make that a priority.
It was a phenomenon. It was.
Yeah, it is. Like, there's no question about that. But you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
After that, like, you stuck the landing, great. And that's honestly, there were moments inside that phase 3 they had to stick the landing, otherwise we would never got to that point. And the first Avengers is that. And so there's a lot of built-in trust there. So after Avengers Endgame, they do Spider-Man Far From Home. Totally expected. Another Spider-Man movie, made him a ton of money, whatever.
And it was fine. It was like, whatever. Like this, this is a Spider-Man sequel.
We then have the year break, and the only reason we have a year break is because of the pandemic. It is not because of a chosen, like, Paul, Kevin Feige, we're going to take a big, we're going to take a couple of years back, and we're going to sit back, we're going to see the landscape, and then we're going to adapt to that. None of that. It was because he was forced to move those movies back. And then we got Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals, and Spider-Man No Way Home. We had 4 Marvel movies in the span of a year.
All in the back half of 2021. That was all within like 6 months.
Yeah, like July, September, November, December. That's when we got those. And I feel like Spider-Man No Way Home then sort of once again justified the means because it made a crap ton of money. Yet Shang-Chi is the most important one of this bunch in terms of the overall storyline, connecting to Doctor Strange, connecting to the multiverse and all that stuff.
That's true.
And yet we have not heard a single word from that character since the moment that fucking movie ended. All right.
I don't know what the fuck she's up to.
The Eternals. We have not seen or heard any of those characters or the promise of Blade since that movie. The only thing that we've got is now with this movie, Brave New World. I almost called it Brave New Home. Jesus, that's how interchangeable these titles are. Brave New World. We get this movie that is like trying to solve or like trying to fix the problem that movie left with, like this giant fucking hand in the sky.
Yes.
Then you have Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which I guess I can say is the other film, I stand corrected, is the film that tied a television series, the most successful television series in WandaVision, to the MCU. But people hated that movie because it made her a villain, which of course it was going to make her a villain in that movie because of the fact that, like, did you not watch the end of that series? But anyway, Thor Love and Thunder, which was a failure.
Yes.
And a continued failure for Taika Waititi. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which is just a boring movie.
I missed this one,
and a movie that honestly just wanted to be a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, which could have been an email. Like Ant-Man Quantumanium, one of the worst ones. You mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is essentially an encapsulation of another Endgame and closing off those characters and that part of the franchise, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's like its own bottle thing.
And then the Marvels, which was a massive misguided misstep, didn't make, I mean, like, I don't even remember. I never saw it.
I never saw it either. I haven't seen this one.
But this movie was a budget of, is $374 million. It only made 206, which is bad.
Us two men missed this one, directed by the woman. What does that say about it?
And it was a massive disaster. Deadpool Wolverine comes out, though, and that movie makes a fuck ton of money, $1.4 billion, $1.3 billion. And then this movie this weekend is going to not do that again. And so you're seeing the pattern here, which is The established characters are the people that are what audiences want to go see. Like Doctor Strange made a ton of money, Black Panther made a ton of money, Guardians made a ton of money, Deadpool made a ton of money, and Spider-Man makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
But if they're the B characters, that's not going to work. And if it's plot lines that they don't feel that is necessary, they're not going to go see it. The test of this is going to actually be in May when Thunderbolts comes out, which
I'll
is
be interested to see that. Yeah.
which is being kind of marketed as Marvel's um, Suicide Squad,
Basically, yeah.
basically, with no characters that are like outside of Bucky that are from the phase one or like from the first half of any of the phases. You know what I mean? Because now we're going to be in phase 6. Then they have Fantastic Four. That's going to make a crap ton of money.
It is.
I'm going to call that right now because Fantastic Four, like, it's going to make a crap ton of money.
I think Fantastic Four will be huge.
It's going to be huge, but that movie is probably going to have to connect back to. That's the movie that's going to connect into Doomsday because we're going to see Robert Downey Jr.'s Victor Von Doom in that film. And it all feels, again, like they're reactionary rather than creatively interesting decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at who they brought back to do Doomsday and Secret Wars. It's the guys that directed the Captain America movies before this and in an Endgame and Infinity War. They got the same screenwriters to do it. So they got the Russo brothers back to direct it. They got, Michael Weldon and Stephen McFeely, who wrote all the Captain America movies, that wrote Thor: The Dark World and wrote Infinity War and Endgame. And then they got Downey back. And it feels like now they're doing their own nostalgic member berries inside a franchise. And when you do that, you're a franchise that honestly is on the verge of dying.
Yeah.
And if those movies are bad starting next year, which they have a very big possibility of doing, then I think the MCU is on life support. And Trace, I wanted to ask you this. In a world where the MCU is struggling, because maybe they do struggle. Maybe I lie. Fantastic Four doesn't make a ton of money. Thunderbolts is another misstep. Brave New World doesn't make back its money. And we're walking into Doomsday as literally a Doomsday for the franchise. And they have a Spider-Man movie that they're saying is going to come out next year. They're in pre-production. They're not even like started filming that. What does that then do for the overall movie landscape? Because these were big life support things that helped theaters, that got people to go see it. Are we going to then see a shift in what studios make? And because I think also too, whatever affects this for the MCU is going to affect what James Gunn's doing over with the DC films reboot.
Yeah.
Right.
That's I think that's true. They kind of have a I think what happens with it would kind of inform a lot of other franchises outside of Marvel, like DC. But if in this scenario where Avengers Doomsday totally flops and like there's this big kind of just a gap in the market where these tentpole Marvel movies that were kind of allowing, other what mid-budget and smaller budget movies that we do get in theaters to be made. I don't know what that does at the theatrical landscape. I feel like over the past kind of through this decade though, I've seen it proven time and time again that people will show up for original movies that have good word of mouth and just look good. I mean, I know that I know Oppenheimer had the Barbenheimer meme tied to it, but I don't feel like that movie is as successful as it is without being a great fucking movie. And obviously, like Christopher Nolan has his own like kind of cultural cachet attached to him, so that helps with that too. But I feel like we've seen plenty of examples where if Hollywood and studios would just focus on the quality of their movies that people will show up for them. Like I really don't think it's that difficult of an equation to figure out. And I mean, I don't know. I think there is gonna be a day where there is an MCU hole that inevitably kind of appears. Like I just don't think this keeps up forever. And I think there's just gonna have to be an adaptation to that new reality. I think some other like very popular IP franchise could take its place, and something kind of that mirrors that they try to get to mirror the kind of cultural ubiquity of this could kind of take over, and if done successfully, could kind of take its place. But I don't see why they couldn't just focus uh, on new original franchises or just one-off movies that people show up and are good, like has been proven to be a success over this. I mean, time and time again, but especially this decade so far. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, the thing is that I don't think that they can go back on any of this. Like this all has been to help Disney Plus, and the television series are what they are. And wanting to connect everything has cost them dearly, I think. And it's the same. And I think the other thing with the DC films is nobody wants to see two of these things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they weren't successful, and they weren't good movies. Like in comparison to the Marvel movies, like the Marvel movies have just gotten lazy. Like they are lazy films. Like this movie that that we talked about at the top, like visually it's lazy, story-wise it's lazy, the performances are not captivating enough. Just every single plot point of it feels like part of the machine. And I think audiences are catching up to that. I think, the B minus cinema score that I believe you mentioned is one of the worst, if not the worst, in the franchise's history. And that's
Yes.
not good. Like that screams, in a year post this, that we had tons of movies from various genres be success stories. And yes, there's going to be like one or two of these things that come out every year, and it's going to be like, well, see, we want to see superhero movies. And it's like, no, and why Deadpool Wolverine was so rare was because it was the first time ever they released just one movie. And when they released just one movie, everybody got hyped and ready for it.
Yeah.
And they went and obsessed with it like a normal franchise, like a normal movie. But I agree with you. I think that there's like, this might be the opportunity to try to get us back to where we were at before Marvel came in, where directors, because you look at it, like 2026 is an insane year. We're going to have a Spielberg movie. We're going to have which is like a genre Spielberg movie. We're going to have Jordan Peele's film. We're going to have a Nolan film, and we're going to have Greta Gerwig's Narnia movie all in the same year.
Yep.
Like those are three of the four biggest, or I'll probably say four of the biggest directors in the world. Three of the four of them have the cachet to do whatever they want right now. And Spielberg kind of can do whatever he wants to because he's Steven Spielberg. You're going to have somewhere out there floating in the waters is Big Jim, just floating out there with another Avatar movie waiting to threaten us with a good time.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is actually over the last couple of years been thinking about is Big Jim. And the idea that this guy he's making honestly the same movie over and over again with these Avatar movies that he's made before.
Right.
But they're so visually interesting,
Yes.
compelling, and rare that like he spent a decade plus getting Way of Water ready for us. We all saw it, and people went and didn't care that it was 3.5 hours or whatever it was. They just went and saw it, and it made and it's again now a top 5 highest grossing movie of all time.
Yeah.
And it was really good.
Yeah.
And it took its time. And I think that that's the other thing. It's like, we have a Mission Impossible movie coming out this year. Could that be the end of that, franchise? We'll have to talk about that later this year. there's a passing of a torch at this point for franchise filmmaking, or better yet, original filmmaking can come back into the fold. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that these movies have to exist, but I think Marvel should learn from themselves. And this year's going to be a good test of that. Just because you got one successful movie, it doesn't justify the three other films that came out this year that were terrible. Like they get to pull even when that's not the case. And I think Doomsday and Secret Wars are going to be a massive. I think those movies are going to be like 3.5 hours. Like I think like those movies have to be because there's going to be so many things that they're going to have to connect television series and movies and old plot lines from the first three phases
Yeah.
potentially too that we haven't even thought about as well and make it feel like a coherent movie. I don't know if that's possible. And that's the thing too is I think when we talk about Thunderbolts or if we talk about Fantastic Four, because I really don't have to talk about Thunderbolts here on an episode, but I think Fantastic Four would be an episode that we probably had to talk about in
Hmm.
July because that's going to be the setup for what is to come. And I think that going forward, I don't think that, I know we teased as that we're going to try to fix this. I don't think there's a way to fix this.
I don't think so
I think
either.
I think that this is I think it's kind of crashing before our eyes. And I think it's great because I think that then it forces studios to have to rethink their approach.
Yeah, it forces
I,
them to adapt.
I think that the last 2 years with Barbenheimer, the Wicked Gladiator weekend, I think that it proves that if you can make these big budgeted films, like Wicked's IP, Gladiator's IP, Nolan's a brand, Gerwig's a brand at this point. These are brands. Your brand should be directors, should be aesthetics from the visual lens of these geniuses you want to give money to,
Hmm.
right? Because nobody wants to really see a movie about the Odyssey. We've been there and we've done that, but it's from Christopher Nolan. So everyone's going to buy those books at Barnes and Noble
Yeah.
and reread that shit that we had to read in middle school that nobody wanted to read in the first place. You know what I mean? And that's kind of great because we all kind of thought a movie like that dies with Ridley Scott. And he's just like, no, I'm the biggest director on the planet. I'm going to make my sort of epic, version in the way of like Gladiator or whatnot, like that Ridley Scott has done. And I think that that's really fascinating. And a studio and like Universal's like, well, this guy like made $1 billion for a movie about people sitting in a room just talking about the bomb. Let's just give him the money.
Yeah.
And I think that we should have some maybe. I feel like weirdly we're in an optimistic place, even though like I also think that like Warner Brothers giving PTA $150 million to make a movie that could be like a disastrous
Yeah.
mistake. As much as I want to see that movie, I sit there and I go like, I don't know if that's the right move, but that's still a risk and a chance. I think it's much more interesting than $200 million on a Captain America movie that we've already seen the story for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even just aside from like letting other filmmakers have risks, you know, it would just be nice to see a more diversified franchise landscape where like the main cultural player isn't one that doesn't even offer spectacle anymore.
Trace,
Or
what
he's
is your favorite franchise going on right now? Like that's
favorite.
actually a that's actually a good question
Oh
to
man,
ask.
that's a hard question actually.
I have mine. It's very easy for me.
I gotta think. I mean, I love the Mission Impossible movies. I do.
That's mine.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind. I do love the Avatar movies, and I love how much of an event those are.
Yeah.
And I show out for Jimmy C every time, and I
Big Jim,
and and
we stand Big Jim.
yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean. It's like for both of those franchises, it's like okay, now like Mission Impossible is pretty solidly under Christopher McQuarrie, so that's kind of its auteur right now, and Tom Cruise is kind of probably could probably
I was
file in
gonna
to be a
say it's
director
more
as well.
Cruise than Macquarie. Like
Yeah.
Macquarie's like, yeah, yeah, sure, I'll write something for you.
But and then Avatar is obviously James Cameron. So like these are two franchises that are indebted to the vision of their auteurs, and they offer really like pretty solid storytelling and more importantly for IPs of this nature, like a sense of spectacle and like good filmmaking, which is something the MCU has just lost completely. You can't I just feel like you can't expect people to keep showing up for these in the way they always have when something like Captain America Brave New World looks like it was shot in front of a million green screens and then kind of just like choppily edited
It's
together
like
and
a
just
car commercial.
yeah, it literally does look like a car commercial.
But then also too, like, what if, of the last 10 years, 15 years, I think the most successful franchise story in Hollywood has been the John Wick series. And
Yeah,
that is
that's a good point.
that is a series that is from the get-go had an aesthetic from its director.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is known what it is. It's not trying to be anything else other than what it is. And then it's elevated itself. It's very much like Mission Impossible. It's elevated itself every single time. Has a committed performance from its lead. Has these great action set pieces, and these movies are great. Like
Yeah.
I love the John Wick movies. Like they pigeonholed themselves into a corner with the fourth one and the ending, but like could totally get out of it if they wanted to. We also live in a world where like the longest running or biggest franchises in the world are sort of sitting in idle. And that's James Bond because they haven't picked a new Bond.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem, which could maybe have like helped maybe the MCU like kick them out the door if it was successful or if that fan base was like had like just a tinge of just like patience or like non-toxicity, and that's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Which is the biggest franchise of all time in terms of just if they could land a Star Wars movie correctly. But again, that's Disney.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If they could land a Star Wars movie correctly, they would be the most popular people on the planet. They can't do it because they keep second guessing themselves. And so yeah, I mean like Avatar is another example, but they give Big Jim complete total control over that.
Yeah, because he won't accept anything less.
No, he won't. And those movies like cost like a fortune, and yet they make everything back. Like, and so like it has been an investment well worth it. But even he has said at times, I will not make all 5 of these movies. I will not make movies beyond that. Someone is going to have to take the mantle of that, which is a scary thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because then that means that Disney owns this goddamn franchise and will run it into the ground and kill it. But at the same time, you have to have somebody capable enough to understand how to make a movie like that. And only somebody like James Cameron knows how to make a movie like that. So that's the difficult part of it too. I mean, Ryan Johnson's got the Knives Out films, but they're all being put on fucking Netflix and not making any money. You have Greta Gerwig, who's now making these Narnia movies, which could be a totally big thing. And Netflix kind of patting themselves on the back. They're like, we got some IMAX screens for you, Greta. And it's like, no, you should have this movie in the theater because this movie could make you $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the potential of what, because if she just came off a movie that made $1 billion.
Yep.
So like, that's what you have there as your sauce to help your subscriptions and your viewers. And you're not willing to do that. So there's a lot of things that go back and forth, but I agree with you. We have to allow, because like even these, I'm going to name these directors and you tell me what they have in common. Okay.
Yep.
So Kate Shortland, John Watts, Peyton Reed, Sean Levy, Julius Iona, Jake Shire. Okay. You want me to keep going? Matt Shankman, Dustin Daniel Cretton. What do all these people have in common? That you couldn't tell me what their visual style is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so therefore they are perfect cogs in the machine here at Marvel. Now, every now and then you get a James Gunn. I don't know what a James Gunn movie looks like, honestly, either. You get a Sam Raimi, which his style got lost in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Taika Waititi, which that's not a very good visual style in the first place.
Mm-mm.
And then Coogler, which we haven't seen Ryan Coogler do an original film since Fruitvale Station.
which is insane.
Like, think about that. Like, even as much as like I love the first Creed, it's a movie that exists within IP. Then he did Black Panther and Black Panther 2. So Sinners is the first time in what? When did Fruitvale Station come out? Like a decade ago? Like
Yeah,
over a decade
I think
ago?
like 2011 or 2012,
Like Fruitvale Station 2013.
2013.
So first time in 12 years the man has been able to make something original.
And that's it's and that's what I feel like that's true if it's stars too. Like the Marvel machine kind of has eaten up so much time from so many creatives that we could have gotten much differentiated or original projects from, but instead they're kind of stuck in this cycle of making these just franchise cog machine movies. Um, and yeah, it is just really disheartening to see, especially when nobody that directs any of these movies is able to imprint them with any of their own visual style or personality. They are all just kind of facilitating the the real what is essentially, like I said before, a corporate movie. Like they are basically just there to make sure it gets done, is the way I've always seen it. And that's why all of these directors who maybe are a little bit more experienced or have a little bit more of a distinct style, like Sam Raimi, um, it just gets swallowed up by uh, what is a movie by committee, basically. And they have to listen to the committee because they can't do anything too experimental with it.
I feel like the director is just his name is Kevin Feige.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
They're at the whim of Kevin Feige's vision.
Which is I don't think he has a vision. I think he's a man just like trying to make it up.
No,
I
he's
feel
like
like
a business. He's running a business.
yeah. As long as he makes some money, that's all that matters. And that's
Yeah.
the point I think of all this is like they're going to be around 3 more films this year or 2 more films this year, 3 films in total. They're not going to it'll be really interesting to see how it goes forward. But I think we're seeing the fall right in front of our eyes and no one's really talking about it. And that could be really bad for theaters
Yeah.
but that means then with Hollywood has to react in a way to give audiences what they want. And I feel like Trace this last year, we saw kind of what they want. They want to see new things they haven't seen either in a while or ever on the big screen. They want to be maybe, I think horror movies were just the way to go.
Horror movies really
They're
showed
cheaply,
out for
they're like
2024.
very cheap. You can make them on the cheap. But like in terms of big blockbusters, like you need movie stars. Like that's the other kind of thing. No offense to Anthony Mackie. I'm not trying to be a dick to him. Yeah, I mean, I know he's not a lovely guy, for what everybody says, but like I'm sure, like, and I think it's great that he's Captain America. I think that like all the assholes on Twitter and on social media is like trying to make this like a race thing, because it's a black Captain America, is disgusting and kind of proves then I guess that, but it's also like you're arguing about a movie whose politics aren't even worth the discussion in this podcast and other spheres. So like you're getting hung up on something that honestly is like 3 years old too, and like
Yeah.
6 years old because we already knew this about about Sam and that he was going to be Captain America. So it's like get over yourselves. But Anthony Mackie's not a movie star,
Yeah. He's not.
and he's
And
not.
to be fair to him, the movie's not doing him any favors. Like,
No.
Sam Wilson is not a very detailed or sketched out character past the TV show, maybe, which I haven't seen, in the way that Steve Rogers is. So it's not like the movie is really like affording him a chance to kind of step into that role properly. And so you have this guy that's not the movie star that Chris Evans is in a character that's not written very well. And like it's a recipe for disaster.
It is a recipe for disaster, and
I think
yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a different perspective. We just need to learn how to invest money into movies more efficiently too, and just not expect like every blockbuster to be your $1 billion blockbuster. And to that extent, figure out how to budget these things better. I mean, like some of like, your biggest movies of the year from 2024, Inside Out 2, domestically made about like $600 million. Like it's a huge movie, made $1 billion worldwide. Those are your really big movies from last
How
year.
much that
Deadpool,
movie
Wolverine.
cost, Trace?
I'm not sure. I have to look it up. This doesn't have the budget on it.
I can tell you this real quick.
200 million, it looks like.
200 million.
Yeah.
So let's say like it made 1.7 billion dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, 200 million for an animated movie, like that's kind of feels like what it is. Also, it's a sequel and everything. But even if they cut that back, like that's
yes.
still
Well, so like my point is like,
inflation.
some of these other movies some movies that perform really well but aren't necessarily in the top 10 of the year because they're not big franchise movies. Take Nosferatu. Nosferatu has made $175 million worldwide. They made that for $50 million.
Yeah.
Like that, like
You know what's funny?
Do that.
What's so funny is thinking about Nosferatu and that's I mean that is a big success. Like for a Robert Eggers movie that doesn't shake its visual and honestly even story-wise like aesthetic, right?
Mhm.
To then see a movie like The Fall Guy, which was the movie that kicked off last summer.
Yeah.
That movie's budget, I want to say, was like, and maybe you can look this up for me. I want to say it was like in the 150 range.
It looks like it's 125.
125. And that movie made how much in total when it was all said and done?
Worldwide, looks like 181.
Yeah. That's the problem. A movie
Yep.
like that shouldn't be $125 million.
No, absolutely not.
That should
have been a $50 million movie.
I was going to say,
probably.
that should be 50, 60 at most. People should be taking the pay cuts. And I think that that's what's so great about the successes of 2023. Like Barbie, if that was even 150 million, hell, if that was even a $200 million budget, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like that movie made a crap ton of money. Like Across the Spider-Verse made a crap ton of money. Like I'm not saying these movies can't exist in IP, but you have to tell us something new, and they have to be from filmmakers that have a singular voice and have something to say. Because like even still, like the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that came out within 2023, made a ton of money, did really well for itself. But also within that year too is Ant-Man and the Marvels, which were financial disasters. And so therefore, like you can't just level it out. And then also then expect, because like I expected in about 5 years us to have a movie that tries to connect back to the Marvels or connects back to Quantumania. That's the Pandora's box that Brave New World presents, is that we're going to go to the sludge and pick up the remaining pieces of nostalgic or plot lines that nobody cares about with characters we don't care about and market that with a $200 million budget and see if we can get away with it. And I'm kind of glad that audience are saying no, because my audience, I don't know how your audience was. I think you were in a critic screening, but my audience, I saw it with normal people. People were leaving the theater as the movie was playing. That is a sign that your franchise is in trouble and you're not listening to the people. And I'm not saying you need to listen to the extent of like, because Disney's probably like, we're not going to listen to them to the extent of Star Wars and ruin the whole fucking thing for everybody. And then turn out to make Rise of Skywalker, which is a giant piece of shit. But Doomsday and Secret Wars have the potential to feel like a Rise of Skywalker moment for the biggest franchise on the planet, where they're going to sit there and they go, what the fuck do we do next? Because when Downey pulled the mask off at Comic-Con, it reeked of desperation.
It did. Yeah.
It reeked of just a franchise.
Anything they can do.
Needed anything. And the reaction to that was mixed as well, too. Like to make him the villain, like, which Victor Von Doom is a huge villain inside inside the Marvel comics. For that to be Downey as well, like that is an enormous, I think, error.
I think so too.
And you know what's crazy, Trace? As we're going to start wrapping this up, they still have the X-Men.
I know.
They have yet to really touch that with their versions of the X-Men in their cinematic universe, and then explain to me over the course of 15 years, now sort of backtracking, like why they didn't have mutants in the MCU in the first place.
Yep.
Like it's gonna be they're gonna they're gonna back themselves into a corner that they're not gonna be able to write themselves out of, because they have some of the worst writers in Hollywood too. Like these stories, once you start thinking about them, they don't make sense and they
Yeah.
fall apart. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. It's like most franchises, movies can fall apart, but these fall apart to epic proportions. And the joke to seriousness ratios in these movies, part of the machine where it's like something serious happens and then we got to undercut it with a joke,
Yeah.
like the Big Bang Theory of writing, um, uh, or the just like the sitcom sort of writing of these movies. I don't think they age well even for rewatches.
No, absolutely not. They're very annoying to watch. The quips where someone's fighting Thanos and like, oh, I sure am hungry. Like, whatever stupid whatever stupid thing they have them say. And you just mentioned
And
like
that's becomes like a catchpromise for that person.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I sure am hungry.
Like, I don't know, like you mentioned the crowd you watched it with. I saw it at a promo screening, so there was press and public in there, and it was just no one walked out or anything, but it was just like the energy was just low, and like the dialogue in Brave New World is so particularly bad that you could kind of feel the energy in the theater. No one was like laughing at any of the one-liners, and everyone was like, it just felt like nobody was really into it at all. So it's definitely people are starting to feel it, I feel like.
It's just a side character.
Yeah,
Get in a movie, man. And
yeah,
it's not a shot at Anthony Mackie. It's great that we have a black actor playing Captain America. That's very cool.
yeah. I wish they were serving him better material.
Yes.
Like, I wish he was.
Like
I wish he
that's
had a
the
better
thing. It's like
opportunity.
give, give the man a chance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like give him a shot. So, um, Trace, any last things you want to say before we sort of put this damn franchise to bed because it seems like it's putting itself to bed.
I just think the fundamental lesson is that you cannot just perpetually spend exorbitant amounts of money on movies that look like shit, are written like shit, have no directorial vision behind them, and are cut to hell in post-production because y'all can't decide what to do with them, and then expect that to live up to the glory days of your franchise. There's just it's right now this is a franchise run by insane people, honestly, because I can't believe that they just expect that like a movie like Captain America Brave New World was okay to put out into theaters in the shape it was in and expect that to be the torch carrying the franchise forward. Um that's really where I'm at with this. I think those are my final words.
I think they need to replace Kevin Feige. That's my solution.
Yeah.
I think that I know people are going to go like, that's never going to happen, Ryan. I think they need somebody to come in here because I do see a doomsday happening
Yes.
where I think that I think these movies are going to make money, but I think it's going to be like, I can't believe I had to say this. This is going to hurt.
Oh no.
So like, I love The Last Jedi.
Yeah, me too.
And I love what that movie sort of represents for that franchise, a chance to rebuild itself and cement its legacy beyond member berries and nostalgia.
Hmm.
A chance to say like, in order for this franchise to move forward, we have to eliminate our attachment to the past. We have to like, you know what I mean? Let the past
Yep.
die. And that movie didn't that movie made significantly less money than like the sort of like just copy and paste of the new of A New Hope with the Force Awakens. And the response to that was, no, that's a terrible idea. That's disrespectful of an idea. Ryan Johnson, you're wrong. Let's go back to J.J. Abrams. And so I can feel and sense that even though both of those movies made a ton of money, there was discourse within the fandom that sort of started splitting people apart. And it's not the diehard fans that you should be concerned about, and it's not you and I as critics because we're not going to pay to see these movies. Except if you're me, who I had an Alamo pass and I was like, oh, $2, cool. It justified my month. Is the casual viewer.
Yeah.
because you're going to, and this goes back to this kind of wraps up the whole Avengers argument. So my dad has rarely sees these movies, but the Avengers movies he goes to. There's 14 films in between Endgame and Doomsday. That's a lot of fucking homework for the casual viewer to get back to.
It sure
and that's
is.
just the movies. We talked about the television shows. So how are you supposed to know if you're a casual viewer of these things and want to be a part of that cinematic experience? How are you supposed to know what this all connects to?
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, I think it'll be a disaster for audiences, and people will go, I don't know what any of this means. It's just yelling at a screen. And even a franchise that feels very tired, like the Fast and Furious franchise, well, all you have to do is watch the film before to understand what's going on. You don't, or half those movies you can just jump right in. I didn't see the first four until I saw five. And when I saw five, I was like, okay, I'll go back and watch the other ones. You know what I mean? Like, so that happens all the time. But if those Avengers movies, and even to a certain extent, Fantastic Four, people start feeling the fatigue with their paying dollar, then yeah, you have to consider a move. And maybe Kevin, and you know what? This is a great, sports analogy. Sometimes someone has to move as a head coach to another franchise to see just how really good they are. Case in point is like, Andy Reid for the Chiefs.
Right.
He was a great coach at Philadelphia for years. Just couldn't get him over the hump. Then he left, went to the Chiefs, has won 3 Super Bowls. It's Phil Jackson moving from the Bulls to the Lakers, right? But then sometimes you got to be like, okay, Phil Jackson to then controlling the Knicks and being like this terrible president of basketball operations to the point where he's making these terrible trades that to try to get people to come to the building and not embracing the thing that's right in front of him, which is like Linsanity and and then paying way too much for Amari Stoudemire and all these different stuff. And now I just sound like Bill Simmons on this podcast. But the point being is that if you have a franchise and you keep going back to a well and you don't have a plan and you don't have focus and you don't have interesting visual or just on the page storytelling, and you're having to go to a well where you're getting a dead man in your franchise to come from a different universe to now play that, like, think about that just from that logic. They're getting Downey to come from another universe to play another character in a movie that's supposed to tie into the universe that we care about, but we're not. But where is actually the Fantastic Four in our in like the main universe? Like, do they exist? What about the mutants? Like, there's all these different things. There's all these questions, and one movie or two movies have to solve all of that plus the gobbledygook that's come before.
Yep,
it's an impossible task.
Yeah,
and so therefore they have had it on the hat, on the hat, on the hat, on the hat, and it just feels like the U.S. economy. It feels like it's going to crash at a certain point, and we're going to be left with the shambles. Like, how do we piece this back together? How is Hollywood going to be able to do it? And they're going to do it kind of like how they always do, on the back of visionary storytellers creating original ideas. And I think that that's the fundamental thing. It's like, I think we're seeing the end of this. And I think it's going to happen. And even if it makes money, it's going to be like those Star Wars movies where it's going to be like, yeah, it made money, but we don't want to see this anymore.
Yeah.
And that is a damning thing, because after these 2 Avengers movies, they don't have anything announced. They don't have anything in production. Now, granted, a Comic-Con will happen this year, and I'm sure shit will be announced. I'm sure first images and casting and all this shit will start happening, but they don't have anything announced, which is very unusual for them not to have a 2 to 3 year plan.
It's ominous.
And you look at the Shang-Chi sequel has not even started. The Spider-Man film that's supposed to come out next year hasn't even started. They haven't even looked into the X-Men casting. the Blade movie itself has like been had like 4 directors go through the process of it. Like I don't even know if they still have Mahershala Ali at any point.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like you can just see the writing on the wall, right? Like
Hmm.
this thing is starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
So it's that's why it's a fascinating thing to talk about. It's a fascinating thing to discuss because when you've been the top dog for such a long time, you got to start figuring out why. Slowly, we're going to get away from that. And in a year of so many movies that we're anticipating, these movies feel like kind of afterthoughts,
Yeah, they do.
which is
Yeah.
crazy. If you and I and people that follow this start thinking that, what do then average people think
Hmm.
is the real thing? So,
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I pulled up Brave New World's box office for the weekend right now. It's on track for the extra long President's Day weekend. Um, it's on track to make 90 million to 95 million dollars, which isn't like it's not a bomb. Like that's pretty solid, and I think that's above, according to Variety. I mean that opens above the first Captain America movie, pretty close to Winter Soldier, but way below Civil War. Um, but I would love to see what the drop off next weekend is because clearly the audience reception is kind of already pretty damning. And again, like they spent an exorbitant amount of money on this, just in the pure budget, and not to mention whatever the marketing budget is. So like I feel like they're playing this in a way that is just not sustainable. So I don't know. I will be interested to see what Marvel's impending, what looks like their kind of own self-immolation ends up looking like for the theatrical landscape at large. And I'm ready. I am ready for it. I'm ready to see what's after this. I am tired of the MCU cultural homogeny. I'm tired of their cultural dominance. I'm ready for it to be over.
yeah. Do you have like last like we'll get out of here on this. Trace, if there is somebody that you right now, if you're Disney, if you're Warner Brothers, if you're Universal, and you said, okay, make our next 20-year cinematic journey. Like rev up the engine, like start it from the ground up. And they gave it to one person, could be a director, producer, whoever. Who would you give it to?
Oh shit, that's a really hard. So
I know.
this is just like in any potential new franchise that they're coming up with. Like it's just kind of a vague
No,
idea
they tell
of
them you can create it through IP, you can create it through originality. Don't care. Build us the next big thing. Who do you want to give it to?
oh shit. You know what? I I might follow I might I might follow up on our previous episode and say just give it to Steven Soderbergh because I feel like he can do it.
I feel like he's the right kind of person to balance what studios want and what audiences want and what artistically he wants, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
the
mean,
guy that made the Oceans
the guy that
movies.
made the Ocean's movies, yeah, but then like, and they're so specific to him, but still very broad, have a broad sense of appeal to them. So yeah, I don't see why Steven Soderbergh couldn't kickstart any franchise.
I think that's
The new
I think that's probably the right answer. Um I just think Peele's the answer.
Peele is probably, yeah, Peele is a pretty good answer.
I feel
Peele is
like
there.
if they just gave Jordan Peele the keys to the castle, I feel like he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be more worried if they gave it to like Edgar Wright. That would be like somebody that I'd be like, oh, please no. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like the
I wouldn't.
fanboyness of it, like, somebody like that. Um, but like, you just know certain people won't do it. Like Nolan would never do it, or, it had to be somebody young. I
Yeah.
feel like, Greta's right there. But, because she's been able to navigate this now with 2 movies back to back with existing IPs. She's got a movie she's making right now, which is like has a chance, on paper to be a big franchise if she wants to with Narnia, and getting Netflix to sort of compromise. I still think Ryan Johnson would be the right move too.
Yeah, I don't
I
yeah,
think
Ryan,
like
yeah.
I think Johnson's made 3 films back to back that, or even I mean most of his films in his filmography, they have like the right tone for a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, doing the Benoit Blanc thing, like that's kind of the thing, right? It's like that's built on all the old whodunits while making it uniquely and distinctly his own vision of that, and getting a massive star and cast together to create something completely entertaining. But yeah, I mean, like, I'd love to see somebody just come along, and probably Soderbergh. Like, Soderbergh is a great answer if he wasn't like 60 years old
Yeah,
as well
yeah.
too. But who knows? Who knows who it's going to be?
You know who's an underrated franchise filmmaker that deserves a new kind of lease on life? We need to get Brad Bird doing something. Where's Bird at?
I think it's like Bird making an animated film, or is he making a live action film?
I don't know what he's up to right now. It
I
says
don't know, but I feel like he would be the right move too. But then again,
he's also older, but
he's also older, but he's just got like the right. I think he knows what he wants.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, the answer of this is just probably right now is we're seeing that big franchise with Big Jim. It's just that he's not making those movies at a consistent pace. Like, he's making them at his own pace, which is, it's kind of rad. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I really
kinda
appreciate
rad.
that. Like, he's like, these are going to come out whenever I say they come out. Whenever I'm done with them is when the new Avatar
Do you
movies
think
are
that new
coming
one's
out.
coming out this year?
Is it scheduled for this year?
Yeah.
Oh shit, absolutely not. No. No, I don't think that movie's coming out this year.
Do you think if that comes out in 26, we're gonna like blow our minds with the fact that we'll have a Nolan, Spielberg, Peele, Gerwig, and
Oh my
Cameron movie
God.
all in one year?
That'd be oh shit. That'd be that's gonna be the best year we've had in a long
Isn't
time.
Fincher like working on a movie right now too? So like he could potentially have that by the
I'm
end.
sure he is,
I'm
yeah.
sure he's doing something with Netflix.
Gosh.
He's got to stop restoring those 4Ks though, because he's not doing himself any favors. So just give me a Blu-ray for Mank or for The Killer. For God's
Yeah,
sakes,
I
we
know,
don't even
right?
have
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, come on, Netflix. So
Good.
Trace, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet?
Yep, you can find my work at the AwardsWatch website, and also Pace Magazine and AV Club. Occasionally some other places, but those are the main places right now. And you can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Trace Sauveur. Just my name.
That's your name. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we have the Director Watch podcast that are on Thursday this week. While we're still in the middle of our Mike Nichols movie series. We're on the back end of the middle. And I have to say, this week's episode, Postcards from the Edge, our great friend Christina Biro is going to be on from Pop Culture Confidential. Have to say this, Trace, and to the listeners, it's not an episode you're going to want to miss.
Oh,
It
shit.
maybe has the funniest gag we've ever had, and we stumbled upon it. And I am only going to say that. I know that puts it on a very high pedestal, but I do not believe you, the listeners, are ready for the episode that is Postcards from the Edge.
Oh my gosh.
It is 80 something episodes in, maybe one of the best episodes we've ever done. So please go. This is hype beyond measure, but it's truly worth it.
This is going to change the Director's Watch podcast.
It really should. If you're all listening out there, please listen to that episode on Thursday. That's when it'll drop. It is you don't even have to watch Postcards from the Edge to really I mean, you should, because it's a good movie, but like, you don't have to understand the insanity that is going to happen on this week's episode.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I appreciate it. 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. We greatly appreciate it. While also on the website, please sign up for the newsletter. Next week's show, the next show that we'll be doing here on the main show should be something awards related. So yeah, just be ready for that. It might have already released, or this one will release first. We don't know. But it'll be some award season related stuff. either reacting to the BAFTAs or reacting to, or getting ready for SAG or whatever. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.